Right after my husband's funeral, my stepdaughter sneered, "Find another table. This one is for real family only, not gold-digging second wives." I calmly placed an envelope on the table and said, "Your father left me this letter. Read it before you celebrate too much." The panic that spread across their faces was absolutely delicious. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Like this story if you want to see just how far a stepmother's revenge can go, and comment what you think was written in that letter. Trust me, you won't guess it. But let me take you back a little, because this story didn't begin at the funeral, not even close. My name is Margaret Maggie Sullivan, and at 63, I believed my life had already settled into its final chapter. I'd been married to William Henderson for 8 years. Our marriage wasn't the kind that people write romance novels about. There were no dramatic declarations or whirlwind adventures, but it was steady, comfortable, peaceful. William was my second husband and I was his second wife. We had both already lived entire lives before finding each other, and in those later years we simply wanted companionship, understanding, and someone to sit beside at the end of the day. For me, William was exactly that, but his children never saw it that way. William had 3 children from his first marriage: Patricia, who was 38, Robert, 36, and Jennifer, the youngest, at 32. Their mother, Eleanor, had died of cancer 15 years earlier. From everything I'd heard, she was a wonderful woman, and in their memories, she had become something even bigger, almost saint-like. I understood that. I respected it. I never once tried to replace their mother. But apparently, understanding wasn't enough. From the very beginning, they made it painfully clear that I didn't belong. At family gatherings, they would sit together reminiscing about their childhood, sharing inside jokes and memories from before I entered the picture. They made a point of emphasizing that phrase, "before Dad married Maggie." It was always said with a little smile, a little glance, a reminder. They would show up at our house without warning and walk right past me as if I were part of the furniture. Jennifer once asked me to make coffee for everyone during a visit, then loudly told her siblings, "Well, at least she's useful for something." I heard every word, and for 8 years I said nothing. Whenever I mentioned it to William, he would sigh and squeeze my hand. "They just need time to adjust, Maggie," he would say gently. "You know how hard losing their mother was for them." Time. Apparently 8 years wasn't enough. Still, I kept the peace, because I loved William. Then everything changed. William was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor told us the truth without sugarcoating it. 6 months, maybe. Suddenly, his children became very interested in his life again. They visited constantly, but their visits had a pattern. They would sit beside him and ask questions that had nothing to do with his health. "Dad, maybe you should consider putting the house into a trust." "Dad, we're just thinking about your legacy." Meanwhile, I was the one sitting beside him during chemotherapy. I was the one awake at 3 in the morning when he couldn't sleep from the pain. I was the one researching experimental treatments, booking appointments with specialists across the country, and holding his hand during every frightening test result. But during family dinners, I might as well have been invisible. If William thanked me for something I'd done, the children changed the subject. If he complimented my cooking, someone suddenly needed to make a phone call. If he mentioned how much he appreciated my care, the conversation mysteriously shifted to something else. They couldn't stand hearing him value me. And William noticed. He noticed everything. The funeral was beautiful. Truly, the church was full of people who loved William, colleagues, friends, neighbors, relatives. The eulogies were touching. Patricia spoke about her father's wisdom, Robert spoke about his generosity, Jennifer talked about his deep love for family. They spoke about the lessons he had taught them, about character, integrity, and loyalty. Listening to them, I couldn't help thinking something strange. It was funny how none of them seemed to have actually learned those lessons. After the service, we went to Romano's, William's favorite place. The owner, Tony, had known him for years. When I called ahead, Tony insisted on preparing William's favorite table in the back corner. I thought it would be a nice place for everyone to share stories about him, but Jennifer had other plans. As I walked toward the table where the family was gathering, Jennifer stepped in front of me and blocked my path. "Excuse me, Maggie," she said loudly, enough for half the restaurant to hear. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I stopped. "This table is reserved for family, real family." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You know, people who actually loved Dad, not gold-digging second wives." The entire restaurant went quiet. Patricia and Robert exchanged a glance. Robert looked like he was trying not to laugh. Around us, other relatives and friends stared awkwardly at their plates, pretending not to notice. For 8 years, I had tolerated their insults, their little humiliations, their deliberate exclusions. I told myself it came from grief, that one day they would finally accept me. But standing there 2 hours after burying my husband, listening to his daughter call me a gold digger in front of everyone who loved him, something inside me finally woke up. Slowly, I reached into my purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. William's elegant handwriting was written across the front, to be opened after my funeral. I had been carrying it with me for 3 weeks. William had given it to me himself. "You know what, Jennifer?" I said calmly. "You're absolutely right." Her smug expression flickered with confusion. "This conversation is about family, about who really loved your father." Then I tossed the envelope on the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped beside the breadbasket. And just like that, all 3 of their faces turned pale. "Your father left me this letter," I said quietly. "He asked me to share it with you after the funeral." Patricia narrowed her eyes. "What kind of letter?" "The kind that explains exactly what your father thought about his real family." Robert leaned forward. "Are you threatening us?" I laughed softly. "Threats are for people who have something to fear, Robert. I'm just sharing William's final words." Jennifer reached for the envelope. Her hand was shaking. "This is ridiculous. Dad would never write anything bad about us." "You're right," I said calmly. "He wouldn't write anything bad about loving children." I paused, but he had quite a lot to say about greedy, disrespectful ones. Silence spread across the table. Other diners were definitely watching now. Tony stood near the bar, pretending to polish a glass while staring directly at us. Patricia slowly picked up the envelope. "If this is some kind of manipulation—" "Patricia," I interrupted gently, "the only manipulation happening here is what you 3 have been doing for 8 years. Your father just finally decided to respond." Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, written in William's careful handwriting. I had already read it, of course. William had shown it to me before sealing it. He wanted to make sure I understood what was coming. "Should I read it out loud?" Patricia whispered. "That's entirely up to you," I said, settling into my chair, "though I'm sure the rest of the family would be very interested to hear what William really thought about how his children treated his wife." Robert's face turned red. "You coached him to write this. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly." "Actually, Robert," I replied calmly, "your father's mind was perfectly clear until the very end. In fact, the doctors specifically documented that." I gestured toward the letter. "Go ahead, read."
Patricia unfolded the first page and began reading silently. Within seconds, the color drained from her face. After a minute, she looked up at me with something that looked very much like fear. "This can't be real," she whispered. Jennifer grabbed the paper. "What does it say?" Patricia swallowed. "It says he was ashamed of us." The words hit the table like thunder. Robert snatched the letter and scanned the page. "This is impossible," he muttered, but his voice lacked confidence. Jennifer pulled the letter from his hands and kept reading. Her face changed expression after expression, confusion, disbelief, and then dawning horror. "He says we treated Maggie like garbage." "That's only the first page," I said pleasantly. "It gets more interesting." The three of them huddled together, reading the rest. After several long moments, Robert looked up. "The house," he said flatly. "What about the house?" I asked. "He left it to you." "Well, I was his wife." "But we grew up there," Patricia protested. "Our mother's roses are in that garden. The same roses I—"
Your father spent 8 long years watching the way you treated me, like I was something beneath you. 8 years of snide remarks, whispered insults, and deliberate exclusions from family gatherings. 8 years of seeing the truth about who you really are. Patricia was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "We loved him," she said through trembling lips. I looked at her calmly. "No, you loved his money. There's a difference." I picked up my purse and stood, but before leaving I paused and looked back at them. "Oh, and one more thing. The will reading is Monday at 10 a.m. at Johnson, Mitchell & Associates. I suggest all of you attend." "Why?" Robert asked hoarsely. "Because your father left each of you something very special, something that perfectly captures how he felt about the way you treated his wife." I started walking away, then stopped and turned once more. "And Jennifer, about that comment you made when I arrived, about this table being for real family only." She looked up at me with swollen red eyes. "Your father left instructions about his burial plot as well," I continued evenly. "It turns out there's only room for 2 people there, him and his wife, his real wife, the one who actually loved him." Then I walked away from that table with my head held high, feeling lighter than I had in 8 years. Behind me, I could hear the frantic whispers begin. Jennifer sobbing, Robert swearing under his breath, Patricia asking questions no one could answer. At the restaurant entrance, Tony gently caught my arm. "Mrs. Henderson," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband was a good man." "Yes," I replied softly, "he truly was. And he always said the truth has a way of revealing itself eventually." Tony glanced back toward the table where the Henderson children were now huddled together, panic written across their faces. "Will you be okay?" he asked. I smiled, genuinely this time. "Tony, I haven't felt this okay in years." As I walked to my car, I glanced through the restaurant window. They were still bent over William's letter, still trying to process what had just happened. For 8 years they had treated me like I was temporary, like I was an inconvenience they simply had to tolerate until they could reclaim their father entirely. They were about to learn that their father had been paying attention the whole time. The weekend passed in a blur of phone calls I didn't answer and messages I didn't return. Patricia called 17 times. Robert left 6 voicemails. Jennifer sent a dozen text messages that shifted from pleading to angry threats. I ignored every single one. Instead, Saturday morning found me in William's garden, tending Eleanor's roses. I had to admit the irony wasn't lost on me, the gold-digging second wife carefully caring for the first wife's flowers. But the truth was, I had loved this garden from the moment I moved in. Eleanor had exquisite taste in roses, and over the past 8 years, I had slowly added my own touches while still honoring what she had created. The roses were blooming beautifully in the late spring sunlight. The Mr. Lincoln roses Eleanor planted near the back fence were bursting with deep red blooms, their scent rich and unmistakable. The Queen Elizabeth roses I added 3 years earlier were just beginning to open, their soft pink petals catching the morning light. Gardening has a way of quieting the mind. It gave me time to think. William had been planning all of this for months, maybe even longer. I remembered conversations that once seemed casual, but now made perfect sense. One evening he had asked me, "Do you think love can be forced, or does it have to be earned?" At the time, I thought he was simply being philosophical. Now I realized he had been observing his children and quietly forming conclusions. There was the Christmas dinner when Patricia called, demanding William drive to her house immediately to fix her garbage disposal. When I suggested calling a plumber in the morning, she snapped, "It's not your house, Maggie, and it's not your family." William barely spoke for the rest of that evening. Then there was the time Robert needed money for his son's private school tuition. He insisted on meeting William alone at a coffee shop, specifically asking that I not be included. When William mentioned it later, Robert had shrugged. "This is Henderson family business. Maggie wouldn't understand." And then there was Jennifer's birthday party last year. I wasn't invited, after 7 years of marriage to her father. William went alone. When he returned home that night, he was furious. Apparently, Jennifer had stood up during the party and made a cheerful toast about how wonderful it was to have family time without complications. Each moment seemed small at the time, petty slights I tried to overlook for the sake of peace. But William hadn't overlooked them. He had been quietly collecting them, storing them away, watching his children reveal their true character. Around noon on Saturday, the phone rang again. This time it was Dorothy, William's sister. "Maggie, dear," Dorothy said warmly when I answered, "I wanted to check in on you after yesterday. You seemed upset when you left the restaurant." "I'm all right, Dorothy. Thank you for asking." "The children seemed very distressed when I left the restaurant. Patricia was crying." I hesitated, wondering how much to tell her. Dorothy had always been kind to me. From the beginning, she welcomed me into the family in a way William's children never had. I finally said, "William left them a letter. It contained some truths they weren't expecting." "Oh my," Dorothy murmured softly. "What kind of truths?" "The kind that hurt when you haven't been paying attention." There was a pause. "Maggie, I should probably tell you something." "What is it?" "After you left the restaurant yesterday, Patricia approached me. She started asking questions about William's finances, whether I knew anything about recent changes to his will." My stomach tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her her father's finances were none of my business, but Maggie, she seemed desperate. She kept asking if William had been confused or forgetful in his final months." A chill ran through me. Why would she ask that? "I think she's looking for grounds to contest the will," Dorothy said quietly. "She may try to claim he wasn't mentally competent when he made the changes." That evening, I called William's attorney, Harold Johnson. We had worked closely together over the past months while William finalized his estate planning, and I suspected he had been expecting my call. "Mrs. Henderson," he greeted warmly, "I'm very sorry for your loss. William was not only a good client, but a good man." "Thank you, Harold. I'm calling because I think his children might contest the will." "I assumed they would," he replied calmly. "That's precisely why William was so thorough in documenting everything." "What kind of documentation?" I asked. "Well, for starters, William insisted we record several video statements over the past 6 months." "Video statements?" "Yes. In each one, he clearly states that he is of sound mind and explains the reasoning behind the changes to his will, including specific examples of how his children treated you." I felt a wave of relief. "How many videos?"
7. Harold continued. He also asked his oncologist, Dr. Martinez, to provide written confirmation of his mental clarity throughout his treatment. Additionally, we have a psychological evaluation from Dr. Patterson affirming his cognitive competence. He paused before adding gently, Mrs. Henderson, your husband was extremely methodical about this. He anticipated every possible challenge. What exactly did he leave his children? Each child receives $1 and a personal letter explaining his decision. I could picture those letters perfectly. William had always been a quiet man, but when something truly mattered to him, his words were precise and powerful. There's one more thing, Harold said. Yes? If any of his children challenge the estate, their children's education trusts are immediately revoked, every penny. I sat in silence. Patricia had 2 teenagers. Robert had 3 young children. Jennifer had an 8-year-old daughter. Those trusts represented their futures, their college educations, their opportunities. He really thought everything through, I murmured. In 40 years of estate law, I've never seen someone prepare more carefully for family conflict. William spent months researching legal precedents and structuring his estate so his wishes would be legally unbreakable. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the back porch. The sunset painted the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, while the roses released their evening fragrance into the warm air. For the first time in a long while, the house felt peaceful. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Jennifer. We need to talk. This is family business. I stared at the screen for a moment, then quietly set the phone face down.
Family business. How many times had I heard that phrase over the years? It was always used to exclude me, a subtle reminder that I wasn't truly part of their circle. Well, they were about to learn that William had redefined what family meant. The will reading was Monday morning, and I had waited 8 long years to see William's children finally face the consequences of their cruelty. 8 years of swallowing insults, 8 years of overlooking petty slights, 8 years of pretending their rejection didn't hurt. I thought back to the first time I met them, how nervous I'd been, how desperately I wanted them to like me. I'd baked homemade cookies for that first dinner. I'd spent hours researching their interests so I could join their conversations. Patricia had thanked me politely and then thrown the cookies away when she thought I wasn't looking. Robert answered every question with a single word. Jennifer spent the entire evening talking to her father about people and events I couldn't possibly know anything about. Still, I kept trying. For months, I searched for ways to connect with them. I offered to babysit the grandchildren. I sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays. I invited them over for family dinners they rarely attended. Every gesture was met with cool politeness at best and open hostility at worst. Eventually, I stopped trying so hard. Instead, I focused on my relationship with William, on building a peaceful life together despite his children's disapproval. But they interpreted my quiet withdrawal as proof that I never cared about family at all, that I was only interested in their father's money. How wrong they were. My phone rang again. This time it was Patricia. Maggie, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I think we need to clear the air before Monday's meeting. Do we? This situation has gotten out of hand. We're all grieving. We're all emotional. Maybe we said things yesterday that we didn't mean. Speak for yourself, Patricia. I meant every word. There was a long pause. Look, she continued, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but we're family. We should be supporting each other right now, not fighting. You're right, I said. Families should support each other. They should show kindness and respect. They should include each other in important moments. I paused. Too bad your father didn't feel like he had that kind of family. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you invited me to a family event, Patricia? When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you treated me like I mattered? Silence stretched across the line. We can fix this, Patricia finally said. It doesn't have to be too late. You're right, I replied softly. It doesn't have to be too late for your children. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. Monday arrived with crisp October air, the kind that makes you feel like anything is possible. I dressed carefully in my navy blue suit, the one William always said made me look distinguished. As I drove to Harold Johnson's law office, I felt calmer than I had in months. The Henderson children were already there when I arrived, huddled together in the waiting room like conspirators. They looked terrible. Patricia's eyes were swollen from crying. Robert's face was pale and drawn. Jennifer looked like she hadn't slept in days. Mrs. Henderson, the secretary greeted warmly, Mr. Johnson is ready for you. Harold Johnson's office was elegant and welcoming, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and rich mahogany furniture. William had always felt comfortable here, and I could see why. Harold himself was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and kind, perceptive eyes. Please, everyone, take a seat, he said as we entered the conference room. Before we begin, I want to express my condolences. William was not only a valued client, but also a dear friend. Patricia, Robert, and Jennifer sat together on one side of the polished table. I took my seat across from them. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Harold opened a thick folder. William's will is quite straightforward in most respects, but there are several provisions that require explanation. He adjusted his glasses and began reading. The formal legal language was exactly what you'd expect. I, William Thomas Henderson, being of sound mind and body. Then came the part that mattered. To my beloved wife, Margaret Sullivan Henderson, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to our family home, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, life insurance policies, and personal property. The silence in the room was deafening. I heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath. To my children, Patricia Henderson Walsh, Robert James Henderson James, and Jennifer Marie Henderson Davis, I leave the sum of $1 each. Jennifer made a strangled, choking sound. Robert's face turned completely white. However, Harold continued calmly, William also included personal letters for each of his children. He handed them sealed envelopes. Their names were written in William's careful handwriting. Their hands trembled as they opened them. There is also another provision, Harold said gently. William established education trusts for his grandchildren, totaling approximately $1.8 million. The room shifted instantly. These trusts are managed by Mrs. Henderson, he continued, gesturing toward me, and can only be accessed with her approval. That's impossible, Robert snapped. You can't make inheritance conditional on someone else's approval. Actually, you can. William was extremely specific. The children's relationship with their step-grandmother determines their access to their education funds. Patricia had already opened her letter. As she read, her face crumpled. He says we were cruel, she whispered. He says we treated Maggie like garbage and that he was ashamed of us. Jennifer's tears streamed down her face. He says I was the worst, she sobbed. He says I was vindictive and hateful. Robert's letter was the longest. He read silently, his jaw tightening. Finally, he looked up at me with pure hatred. You did this, Maggie. You poisoned him against his own children. Robert, I said calmly, your father was an intelligent man. He made his own decisions after watching your behavior for 8 years. This is manipulation, Patricia said angrily. This isn't grief, this is revenge. You're right, I said evenly. It is revenge. Your father's revenge for 8 years of disrespect. Harold cleared his throat. There's one final provision you should know about. Any attempt to contest this will immediately forfeit all grandchildren's trust funds. That stopped them cold. You can't do that, Jennifer protested. Those children are innocent. William believed parents who would contest a will out of greed are not the kind of parents who should control their children's futures.
I stood and picked up my purse. Well, this has been enlightening. I think we're finished here. Wait, Patricia cried desperately. Maggie, please, we can work this out. I turned slowly. Work what out, Patricia? You spent 8 years making it clear I wasn't family. Your father simply made that official. As I walked toward the door, Robert called out behind me. You'll regret this, Maggie. We'll find a way to fight it. I smiled. Go ahead and try. Your father anticipated that too. The phone calls started that very afternoon. First Patricia, then Robert, then Jennifer. I let them all go to voicemail. Their messages ranged from pleading to threatening to desperate bargaining. Maggie, please call me back. We need to discuss the children's future. Patricia, this is insane, Maggie. Dad wasn't thinking clearly, you know that. Robert, tight with anger. I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry for everything. Please don't punish my daughter for my mistakes. Jennifer, crying. I deleted them all. The next morning, Patricia showed up at my door. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept all night. Her perfectly styled hair was messy and she wasn't wearing makeup. We need to talk, she said. Do we? Maggie, please. My kids don't understand why Grandpa's college fund suddenly has conditions. How do I explain this to them? I considered slamming the door, but something in her expression stopped me. For the first time in 8 years, Patricia looked genuinely distressed about something other than money. You could start by telling them the truth, that their mother spent 8 years treating their grandfather's wife like dirt. It wasn't that bad, wasn't it? Patricia, you threw away cookies I baked for your children. You excluded me from every family gathering. You acted like my presence contaminated your family. Her face flushed with shame. I was protecting my children. From what? From having another grandmother who loved them? That hit home. I saw it in her eyes. I thought you were temporary, she admitted quietly. I thought Dad was just lonely after Mom died, and eventually he'd come to his senses.
So you decided to make my life miserable until I finally gave up and left? She didn't deny it. Patricia, your father left you a letter. What did it say? I asked quietly. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. He said I was jealous and cruel. He said I cared more about preserving Mom's memory than about Dad's happiness. The room went silent. And was he right? I asked. The question hung in the air between us. Patricia's composure finally shattered. Yes, she sobbed. He was right. I hated you because you made him happy. I hated you because he smiled more after he married you. I hated you because you were proof that he could love someone other than my mother. It was the first truly honest thing she had said to me in 8 years. And now? I asked softly. Now I've lost everything, she cried. My inheritance, my children's futures, and any chance of making this right. I studied her carefully, searching her face for signs of manipulation. But what I saw instead was genuine remorse, desperation. Patricia, I said gently, your children's trust funds aren't gone. They're simply managed differently now. Her head snapped up. What does that mean? It means that if your children want a relationship with me, if they want to know their step-grandmother, their education will be fully funded. She stared at me, stunned. And if they don't? She asked slowly. Then you'll have to figure out how to pay for college on your own. I could practically see the calculations forming behind her eyes. Could she swallow her pride enough to encourage her children to build a relationship with me? Could she pretend to accept me for the sake of their futures? What would that look like? She asked carefully. It would look like what should have happened 8 years ago. Family dinners where I'm actually welcome, birthday parties where I'm invited, holidays where I'm included. It would look like treating me like family instead of an intruder. And if we do that, the trust funds stay secure? She asked carefully. Patricia, this isn't about performing for money. Your father's condition was genuine relationships, not fake politeness designed to manipulate money out of me. She flinched at the word manipulate. How would you even know the difference? She asked quietly. Honey, I've been watching your family manipulate people for 8 years. I'm very good at recognizing the real thing. Later that afternoon, Robert called. His approach was different from Patricia's. Maggie, I've been thinking about what Dad wrote in his letter. He said I was weak, that I let Jennifer and Patricia influence how I treated you instead of making my own decisions. Did he? I asked. He also said something else. He said I was the one he was most disappointed in because I used to defend you in the beginning. I remembered that. In the early days of my marriage to William, Robert had occasionally spoken up when his sisters were particularly cruel, but over time that had faded. What changed, Robert? I asked. There was a long pause. Jennifer convinced me you were trying to steal Dad's attention, she said. She said you were trying to replace our mother in his heart. And you believed her? I wanted to, he said quietly. It was easier to accept that Dad had actually found love again. By the end of the week, all 3 Henderson children had reached out, each offering their own version of an apology, but I could tell they were coordinating, strategizing. Then Dorothy called with some interesting news. Maggie, dear, I thought you should know. The children have been asking family members questions about you, your background, your finances, your relationship with William before the marriage. What kind of questions? I asked. Jennifer asked my son if he knew whether you'd ever been married to someone wealthy before, Dorothy said. Patricia asked if I thought you seemed manipulative during your courtship with William. I wasn't surprised. When direct confrontation failed, the Henderson children always resorted to character assassination. And what did you tell them? I asked. I told them the truth, that you made William happier than he'd been since Eleanor died, that you were patient with his health problems and devoted during his illness, and that anyone with eyes could see you genuinely loved him. That weekend, something unexpected happened. William's grandson, Patricia's 17-year-old son, Tyler, showed up at my door. Mrs. Henderson, I'm Tyler Walsh, he said. Of course, I knew who he was, though I had barely been allowed to interact with him over the years. He was tall and lanky, with William's intelligent eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Hello, Tyler, I said. What can I do for you? I want to know about your grandfather's letter, he said. Mom won't show it to me, but she's been crying for days and acting weird about money. I invited him inside and made hot chocolate while I considered how much to tell him. Your grandfather was disappointed in how his children treated me, I said carefully. He believed they were disrespectful and cruel. Were they? Tyler asked. I looked at this young man, so serious, so direct, and decided he deserved honesty. Yes, Tyler, they were. Why? Because they saw me as a threat to their mother's memory and to their inheritance. Tyler nodded slowly. Mom always gets weird when anyone mentions Grandma Eleanor, like she's protecting something. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman. From everything I've heard, she was kind and loving. I never tried to replace her. But they thought you did. Yes, I said gently. They believed I was trying to erase her from your grandfather's life. But love doesn't work like that, Tyler. Your grandfather loving me didn't mean he loved your grandmother any less. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Tyler asked thoughtful questions about William's illness, about our marriage, and about my complicated relationship with his mother and aunts. When he finally left, he hugged me goodbye. I'd like to get to know you better, he said, if that's okay. I'd like that too, I told him. The next morning, Patricia called in a fury. What did you say to Tyler? She demanded. I answered his questions honestly. He came home asking why we treated you so badly. She snapped. He wants to know why I never invited him to his birthday parties. Those are good questions, I said calmly. What did you tell him? It was complicated.
Patricia, it really wasn't complicated. You were protecting your mother's memory at the expense of your father's happiness. Tyler is smart enough to understand that. You're turning my son against me. No, I said quietly. I'm giving him the truth, something he apparently wasn't getting at home. That week, Tyler visited twice more. Then his younger sister, Emma, asked if she could come too. Robert's oldest daughter, Sarah, called and asked if she could visit during her college break. The Henderson children's strategy was backfiring spectacularly. Their attempts to control the narrative were collapsing because their own children were old enough to see through the manipulation. Jennifer was the last holdout, and when she finally made her move, it was almost impressive in its desperation. "Maggie," she said during a phone call, "I've been researching elder abuse." "Oh," I replied. "Did you know isolating someone from their family is a classic sign of manipulation?" "Are you accusing me of elder abuse, Jennifer?" "I'm saying Dad's sudden change to his will looks suspicious. A court might agree." "Jennifer," I replied calmly, "your father documented his decision-making process extensively. He also had multiple medical evaluations confirming his mental competency. But please, by all means, contest the will." "What do you mean?" she asked sharply. "I mean any legal challenge will cause your daughter to lose her education trust fund completely." The silence on the line stretched. "You wouldn't do that to an innocent child." "I wouldn't," I said evenly, "but your father's will would. This is blackmail." "No, Jennifer, this is consequences." 3 months after the will reading, I was finally settling into my new reality. The house felt different without William, lonelier but also more peaceful. No more tense family dinners, no more dreaded holidays, no more walking on eggshells around his children's resentment. Tyler had become a regular visitor, often bringing homework and sitting at my kitchen table while I cooked dinner. Emma had even started calling me Grandma Maggie, despite her mother's obvious discomfort. Robert's children had begun reaching out too, curious about the grandmother they had barely been allowed to know. And that's when Jennifer made her final move. I was in the garden planting spring bulbs when a police car pulled into my driveway. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions serious. "Are you Margaret Henderson?" I asked cautiously. "Yes." "We've received a report of elder abuse," one officer said. "We need to ask you some questions." My blood ran cold. "Elder abuse?" "Someone has alleged that you manipulated your deceased husband's will through emotional abuse and isolation tactics." I slowly set down my gardening tools, my mind racing. "Who made this report?" I asked. "We can't disclose that information, ma'am, but we do need to investigate these claims." I invited them inside, served them coffee. They wanted to know about William's mental state, the dynamics of our marriage, his relationship with his children, and the circumstances surrounding the changes to his will. "Mrs. Henderson," the older officer said finally, "do you have any documentation of your husband's decision-making process?" As a matter of fact, I do. I called Harold Johnson, who arrived within an hour carrying a thick folder. He spread William's medical records, psychological evaluations, and several video testimonials across my dining room table. "Officers," Harold said professionally, "Mr. Henderson anticipated potential challenges to his estate planning. He was extremely thorough in documenting both his mental competency and his reasons for his decisions." They watched 3 of William's recorded testimonials. In each one, he appeared completely lucid, calm, thoughtful, and precise in explaining his choices. "My children believe I should leave my estate to them despite their treatment of my wife," William said in one video. "They seem to think that biological relationships automatically outweigh love, loyalty, and respect." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "I disagree." After the officers left, I called Tyler. "Tyler, I need to ask you something directly. Did your mother or your aunts encourage you to get close to me?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, did they tell you to visit me, to build a relationship with me as part of some plan?" There was a pause.
Mom did suggest I should get to know you better after the will reading, but Grandma Maggie, everything I've said to you has been genuine. I believe you, I said softly, but I think your family is escalating their tactics. What do you mean? Someone reported me to the police for elder abuse. That's insane, he burst out. You never even raised your voice to Grandpa. That evening, Dorothy called with more troubling information. Maggie, I heard through the family grapevine that Jennifer has been calling William's old friends. Asking what? I asked. She's asking whether he seemed confused or forgetful before he died, whether you appeared to control his social interactions. Dear, she's building a case. The next day, Harold called with disturbing news. Maggie, I've received formal notice that Jennifer has filed a complaint with the state's Elder Abuse Investigation Unit. She's also hired an attorney to explore options for contesting the will. I thought any contest would void the children's trust funds. It would, he said, but Jennifer apparently believes she can prove the will was the result of undue influence, which might override that provision. How strong is her case legally? Very weak. William's documentation is thorough and professional, but these investigations can be lengthy and stressful, and she knows that. She's trying to wear you down. That would be my assessment. That weekend, Tyler called again, this time with urgency in his voice. Grandma Maggie, you need to know something. Mom and Aunt Jennifer have been having secret meetings. They've hired a private investigator to look into your background. What are they hoping to find? I don't know, but I heard them talking about your first marriage, your finances before you met Grandpa, your employment history. They're looking for anything that makes you look like a gold digger. After I hung up, I sat quietly in William's chair and thought. The Henderson children were escalating because their earlier strategies had failed. They couldn't manipulate me, couldn't charm me, and couldn't intimidate me into giving them what they wanted. So now they were trying to destroy me. It was time to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. The private investigator must have been expensive, because it took Jennifer's team 6 full weeks to uncover what I had never hidden. Before marrying William, I had been financially comfortable in my own right. My first husband, David, had been a successful engineer who left me well provided for when he died of a heart attack at 59. I had worked as a nurse for 30 years, invested wisely, and owned my own home outright. When I met William, I hadn't needed his money, and that revelation seemed to confuse Jennifer's legal strategy considerably. But the real turning point came when Tyler called with news that changed everything. Grandma Maggie, I found something. What kind of something? I was helping Mom clean out some old boxes in the attic. I found letters. What kind of letters? Love letters from someone named Marcus. My heart skipped. They're dated 2 years before Grandpa died. Tyler, what are you saying? I'm saying Mom was having an affair while Grandpa was sick. He hesitated before continuing, and from what I can tell from the letters, Marcus was pressuring her to convince Grandpa to change his will in her favor. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Patricia's sudden interest in William's finances, her constant questions about his mental competence, her attempts to isolate me from family decisions. Tyler, I said carefully, you need to be very careful. Don't let your mother know you found those letters. It's too late, he said quietly. She caught me reading them. She tried to take them away, but I'd already read enough. What did she say? She said it was complicated, that I didn't understand adult relationships. But Grandma Maggie, some of the letters talk about Grandpa's money, about how she could convince him to leave more to his children if she played it right. Where are the letters now? I hid them. Mom doesn't know where. Tyler, I said firmly, this is very important. Do you trust me? Yes. Then I need you to bring me those letters. 2 hours later, Tyler arrived at my door carrying a shoebox filled with evidence. The letters were devastating. Marcus, whoever he was, had clearly been coaching Patricia on how to manipulate her father's estate planning. Make him feel guilty about leaving so much to Maggie, one letter advised. Play up the family legacy angle. Make him think he's betraying his children's futures. Another letter was even more explicit.
If you can convince him to put the house in a trust with you as co-trustee, we'll have access to the equity, even if he doesn't change the will completely. But the most damning letter was dated just 3 weeks before William's death. The cancer is progressing faster than expected. We need to move quickly on the power of attorney discussions. I called Harold immediately. Harold, I need an emergency meeting, and I think you should bring an expert in probate fraud. The meeting the next morning was explosive. Harold's probate expert, a sharp woman named Rachel Torres, reviewed the letters with growing interest. This is a clear case of attempted estate manipulation, she said finally. Mrs. Henderson was conspiring with an outside party to influence her father's will through fraud. What does this mean for the elder abuse allegations? I asked. It means they disappear completely. In fact, Mrs. Henderson, you may have grounds to file criminal charges against Patricia Henderson for attempted fraud. Harold leaned forward. There's more. If Patricia was attempting to defraud the estate, it could void her access to her children's trust funds entirely, even without contesting the will. I thought about Tyler, about Emma, about all of William's grandchildren caught in the middle of their parents' greed. I don't want to punish the children for their parents' choices, I said slowly, but I do want Patricia, Jennifer, and Robert to understand that their father saw exactly who they were. Rachel smiled slightly. We can work with that. 3 days later, I hosted a family meeting. All 3 Henderson children arrived, probably expecting another argument about the will. Instead, they found Harold, Rachel, and a box of Marcus's letters sitting on my dining room table. Patricia, I said calmly, would you like to explain to your siblings who Marcus is? The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Really, because I have 43 letters here that suggest otherwise. Harold opened the box and pulled out the most incriminating letter. He read it aloud in a steady, professional voice. When he finished, Robert stared at his sister in horror. Patricia, what the hell is this? Rachel spoke calmly. It's evidence of conspiracy to commit estate fraud, which under state law is a felony. Jennifer looked like she might faint. Patricia, please tell me this isn't real. Patricia's composure shattered. I don't understand the pressure I was under, she cried. Marcus said Dad was making a mistake, that he was being manipulated by Maggie. So you decided to manipulate him instead, Robert snapped. I was trying to protect our family legacy. You were trying to steal money, I corrected quietly. Your father was right about all of you, but he was especially right about you, Patricia. Jennifer looked at Harold helplessly. What happens now? That depends on Mrs. Henderson, Harold replied. She could file criminal charges, she could pursue civil action for attempted fraud, she could void all the children's trust funds under the beneficiary misconduct clause. All 3 of them turned to look at me, fear written plainly across their faces. I folded my hands calmly. Here's what's going to happen. I looked directly at Patricia. Patricia, you are going to confess your affair and your attempted fraud to Tyler and Emma.
You're going to explain to everyone why their grandfather changed his will, and you're going to apologize publicly for 8 years of treating me like garbage. If you do that, I won't file criminal charges. Your children's trust funds will remain intact, and we can all finally move forward with the truth out in the open. I let the silence stretch across the room before continuing. I looked at Robert and Jennifer. As for you 2, your father left each of you $1, I said calmly, and a letter explaining exactly why. Their expressions hardened. You have 2 choices, I continued. You can accept it, start building genuine relationships with me, and eventually earn access to your children's education funds, or you can keep fighting and lose everything. Robert leaned forward slightly, his voice tight. And if we choose to build relationships, then your children get their college educations, I replied, and you get the opportunity to prove that you're capable of growth and change. 6 months later, Tyler's 18th birthday party filled my backyard with laughter and music. The garden was glowing in the warm evening light as I set the final arrangements of flowers on the long table. Emma stood beside me, carefully adjusting a ribbon around one of the vases while chatting excitedly about her upcoming science fair project. Across the yard, Sarah, Robert's daughter, was busy setting up the sound system, testing songs and occasionally dancing to the beat while she worked. Patricia and Robert had both come. They were quieter now, more careful with their words, but they were there, making an effort, showing up. Jennifer had moved to California and rarely called anymore, but she had sent Tyler a birthday gift along with a short note wishing him well. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As I watched William's grandchildren laughing together under the string lights, my thoughts drifted back to the letter William had written to me, the one I had never shared with anyone. "Maggie," it began, "by the time you read this, you'll know whether my children learned anything from my final lesson. I hope they did. But if they didn't, I hope you'll still find peace in knowing that love and respect can't be forced, only earned. Build the relationships that feel genuine to you, and don't waste time on the ones that don't. You deserve better than what I was able to give you while trying to balance everyone's feelings. Live freely now." And finally, I was. Tyler stood in the center of the patio as everyone gathered around him. The candles flickered on top of the cake while we sang. He took a deep breath and blew them out in one breath. Everyone cheered. Later, when I asked him what he had wished for, he grinned and shrugged. More family parties like this one. I looked around the garden, at the laughter, the music, the children running between tables, the quiet attempts at reconciliation, and in that moment, I realized something. His wish had already come true.